Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our look at the post-election astrology with all the players. And we've noticed an awful lot of things that we're going to talk about. But first of all, this is Kathy Beale, professional Aquarian on YouTube. If you would go subscribe to her as well, and me, Cosmic Owl Astrology, if you're watching this on Kathy's. And this is Andrew Brewer, professional psychic, who is really only on Facebook, so you can find him there. And a shout out quickly to Rosie Insights, but there's lots of other people that have sent people our way as well. So I'll put them in the description rather than the list gets longer. So thank you to anybody that has sent people our way, to both of us or all of us. And so I think we've got a lot to cover. Kathy is kind of going to start with a bit of a timeline that she kind of came up with, and we're going to strip out. I love my asteroids and centaurs, then they are playing a part, but we realize we have a lot of people here who are not used to astrology now. And so we've just gone down to the more basic planets so it doesn't all look as cluttered. But I still invite you to just listen to the message and the dates as well, even if we're sharing the charts. Okay, so take it away, Kathy, before I lose my voice.
I want to just give you a general flow. This is something we've touched on in earlier videos, but there are three concentrated periods of activity in December that are particularly noticeable. One is the long weekend of the first weekend of the month. So that would be from the 4th to about the 8th. I'll go in detail about that for a second. And then around the 15th, which is the Gemini full moon, and then around Christmas Eve. We have two retrogrades interlocking this month, and they will actually come together on the 15th. So the first one you've probably heard of, Mercury is retrograde. It's the planet that rules how we use our minds, our information flow and channels and vehicles, and also how we physically get around. And the second one is Mars, which rules our energy. It rules the military. It rules how we push ourselves forward, how we go after what we want, and it also represents men. So Mercury is retrograde as the month starts and stations direct on the 15th. Mars starts his retrograde on the 6th, and they are both in fire signs as they do this, and both of them bring opportunities to go back over things we maybe misunderstood or didn't get clearly or didn't pick up right. They both have an investigation drive to them, and they're going to collaborate on the 15th. So there are many, many other things happening around Mars stationing retrograde, which we discussed in I think our last video, but just know it is a time of course correction, of the tides turning, of a lot of illumination, a lot of hidden things or confusion or delusion or deceit starting to come to the surface, and collectives coming together, possibly female empowerment. So that's a lot right there, but just know that whatever you think going into the week, by about the 8th, you'll have a completely different mass of information to go with, which then takes us to the time around the 15th. Information flow will be over the top, lots and lots of stuff coming to light, a lot of things hitting the end of a chapter, and Mercury and Mars collaborating effortlessly, one giving information to the other that the other then goes investigates more or takes action on. There's a culmination and something really big happening because of all of that. And then some calming down and things starting to take some shape by Christmas. The one other thing I will tell you is Mars is retrograde for much, much longer. He is retrograde until almost the end of February, and he is going to cause us to revisit many things that date back to October, in January, in March, possibly into the beginning of April. So know that many storylines aren't over. There will be, and these Mars, as he travels on, is going to activate the chart of just about every player you can think of that we have talked about personally, the US, and also NATO. So there's a whole lot at you. So just remember, there's a cluster of revelation, rethinking, new information, investigating, seeing things differently, the game starting to change early in December, then a lot of stuff coming to a head, and uh, could involve military, could involve the government. It definitely is pivotal to the United States and a number of people who are big players, and then some calming down by the end of the month.
Yeah. And I'm just going to share again. And again, I invite you to just look at the dates and just see how condensed it is. And I just want to emphasize that a lot of this is in what's called mutable signs, which are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. And mutable signs is change and information and new perspectives and information coming to light and truths being revealed and all kinds of other things. What would you want to add to that about mutable signs, Kathy?
Flexibility is an important way to get through this. You can think of what a reed is like. You've got roots, but you're kind of going with the wind, and know that what you think in 1 minute, you could get completely different information on another minute. And also, with this so much being mutable, there's sometimes a trickster element to it. Gemini is definitely, is it this? Is it that? And with Neptune being so much in the mix, there's a lot here about whether communication is true or not. The whole notion of disinformation is really, really big, and like what's real, what is true.
Yeah.
And it's important to sink into your own body and see what resonates. There's a lot of energy in water, and you'll know if it feels right in your body, it might be your truth.
Yeah. So, for those that came from some of the other channels, yes, we've got these clusters like that Kathy mentioned, but it's kind of a process as well. This is going to be unfolding. I wouldn't, say that everything's going to emerge, say, on December the 5th. There's again much more change. I also associate that Neptune in Pisces with the gaslighting that we have all been experiencing. So any thoughts on all of that, Andrew, from your clairvoyant perspective?
I think a big piece of this is going to be the way that men step up or don't in terms of trying to support women. And I think that this retrograde period with Mars, especially being right on the U.S. North Node, is a really important time. And so we have a cultural dynamic as well as a political dynamic. And part of the narrative, I mean, we see it already. The fact that Trump is the president-elect, you see men being much more assertive, more aggressive, more rude, just kind of more in women's face. And I think it's really critical, I'm editorializing here a little bit, that men stand up and try to deflect this. And I think that that's going to be an important theme. I still maintain, I've said this for years and years and years, and I'm still going to say it. I do not think the United States rolls over, hands the keys to the car to Trump, and just lets him run whatever way he wants. I still think there's a lot of pushback. I think this period from when Mars goes retrograde on the 6th, especially from the 6th to the 15th, is a big deal. I do think that there are things happening behind the scenes. I don't want people to feel despondent. I don't want people to give up. We have a collective power. I still think that there are a lot of good things on the horizon. I'm still optimistic. I'm not convinced that it's as dark and bad as it may appear. And I think that it's important that as a collective, we remember that we do have a power and we move forward. So there's a revolutionary aspect to all this too, I think. And simplistically, I just don't want people to feel that they are powerless. I don't want people to feel as if it's some white boy steamrolling thing that's going to happen. There's nothing we can do. There's a lot we can do. There are people already in place. There are safeguards in place. And there is the collective power of people and their intentions. And I'm still, fingers crossed, I think things turn out much better than it may appear right this second. So that's my speech for right this minute. So, yeah.
Okay.
And fitting that is one of the, I'm sorry, fitting that is one of the astrological events that we talked about on previous videos that I didn't specifically mention. And that is when this big cluster happens early in December, the planet that rules women and what we value and our relationships and how we get along with each other moves into the sign of Aquarius, the sign of the collective, also technology, and fuses with Pluto in Aquarius, and that kind of sets a tone for really, really focused grassroots power. And women stepping up and saying, no.
Yes.
Which will end up being in opposition to retrograde Mars not far after that. So, I mean, so Mars, Venus in opposition, and Pluto is a hellraiser. I still think that there is too much good energy. I mean, it's a simplistic way to put it. Too many powerful things within the United States. There's a collective will around the United States through NATO, through Mexico, Canada, wherever. I just think that there are a lot more pushback than may appear, sometimes to people if they think, there's nothing more to do. There's a lot to do. I don't want people to feel despondent. I want them to go, yeah, we're badass. We're going to fix this, and we are going to fix it. And I think this Venus-Mars polarity that we're going to see, especially tied into Pluto, right, is going to be shaken and baken. I still think that there are people that are going to step up, and there are going to be a lot of pleasant surprises for us being, whatever we are, and maybe some unpleasant surprises for Trump in that particular group. So, again, that's my speech. So, hi.
Oh, I completely agree. And if you're feeling a little bit defeated and lost, I would recommend following Timothy Snyder on Blue Sky or wherever else he is. He's on Substack too. He wrote a great book on tyranny that gave steps of just don't roll over and accept it. Don't. And you can do it. There's lots you can do locally or emailing, your representatives and calling them, even if they're all MAGA like mine are. Making your voice heard is still important. So, and it's that collective intention that Andy talked about. So I'd love to start with the USA chart, and just because we're recording this just after the Sagittarius new moon, and then we'll go to the full moon, which is really huge. So, and remembering that it's a process. So we can see that Mars by the full moon will have gone retrograde, very close to the North Node of the USA, but not quite perfecting that conjunction, which means that it didn't quite get there, seeing where we're going to go with the collective potential of the USA. It's got to go back and do some old finished business first. And you can see that Mercury and Mars were in aspect, but the new moon was at 9 Sagittarius, which is very close to the ascendant, the public one-on-one face of the USA, if you like. And then we have the full moon that is right on the USA's Mars, pretty much in the house of open enemies, or also, it's politics and things like that. So, and at the same time, the transiting nodes are going to the US midheaven and IC, which is another big turning point. So, yeah, any thoughts about that? Anybody?
Well, the moon on Mars is illumination of one way this could play out, illumination of information about attacks on our country, attacks by open enemies. That's a probability. And notice that the full moon at 23 Gemini Sagittarius across the houses that deal with relationships, like who we are and what our relationships are. The full moon is squaring Neptune in the US natal chart, Neptune in the ninth house, Neptune in Virgo, which the ninth house has to do with laws and policies, our dealings with foreigners. Neptune in Virgo is the whole immigration issue. It has historically been associated with racism. It is also the evangelicals, in Virgo, the notion is the separation of church and state, but Neptune in Pisces has conflated them. So if you see Neptune in Pisces at 27 Pisces, this is forming, it's a tight T-square to our natal Neptune, but it is a grand cross, which I think I would just put it that way, which means being pulled in multiple directions and momentarily. It's like the hanged man in the tarot, or you're stuck in a log jam, except this is a really flexible log jam, so you could be pulled this way and that way. And I am suggesting that we will get information about attacks that have used disinformation, attacks that have used immigration and religion to get us where we are right now.
Definitely.
I have a
And
lot.
and
Go
just
ahead.
to mention, this is 2 days before the states are due to certify elections. So, or the election. So, what information is going to come to light? There's definitely something coming to light. That's,
And the planet of surprises and ahas and uh it's the insight. I can't think of the right word right there. Uranus at 24 Taurus is in an uncomfortable relationship with that moon. And then it's in an inconjunct with the sun. So there's something startling that is going to be news that it could be shocking, it could disrupt people. And that relationship between Uranus and the moon is one that I equate with having a pebble in your shoe, that it will just keep bothering you and bothering you and bothering you until you look at it and deal with it. And with the inconjunct, which is like a seesaw to the sun, that's requiring an adjustment in something having to do with the truth, Sagittarius, or politics.
And also in Taurus, with Uranus in Taurus, that's about values, really, core kind of the roots of things. So, it's like, get back to, it feels like to me, really getting back to the core values of the promise of the US, which never quite fulfilled, because it was, but anyway.
Well, and well, let me just throw in, Taurus also has to do with money. So there could be shocking information about large amounts of money. That is possible. But notice that Uranus is at the same degree, it's at 24, as the US Mercury, which is at 24 Cancer, and that Mercury is in a similar uncomfortable relationship with the moon and oh, looky there, and in an adjustment aspect with the sun. So what Louise has just drawn is something called a finger of God, pointing right at an adjustment in something having to do with the laws, with policy, with international relationships, with politics.
Yeah, and truth and freedom and kind of all the things that the US is based upon, ideally at least. So this is very powerful, really, all of this, and really, Uranus is going to station retrograde, I mean direct, coming up. So really, it's on aspecting the US moon as well, which is the people. There's so much happening just on this full moon. So full moons are a moon sun opposition of the two lights, they're called. So this is full moons really illuminate and shine their big old lights on what needs to change or needs to be released or needs to shift, particularly in mutable signs. So and lots more happening. Mars, we've mentioned, stationing retrograde on the north node of the USA, and then Mercury stations direct on the full moon just hours afterwards, aspecting really the kind of values and promise of the USA for a big about by the people for the people. In a nutshell, I'm going to be reductive because I realize we're really kind of throwing a lot at people because there's a lot going on. So it's like the USA itself is in a major turning point. Would you agree, Kathy?
Yes, yes. And there's a huge, cartoonishly large element of truth coming to light because Mercury rules Gemini, which is the sign the moon is in, and Jupiter rules Sagittarius, which is the sign Mercury is in. So there is like this natural flow of truth and information, and it will be supersized because one, full moon, two, Jupiter being part of this lineup. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this full moon and its timing is not in keeping with the electoral college going lockstep in the direction that people think it is. This is requiring an adjustment. And I will just keep your ears to the ground about what comes out that forces an adjustment in the way things are done.
Now then, as Kathy mentioned, this full moon and the aspects leading up to it and things affect almost all the players. So I'm going to put the Donald's chart in. The full moon is right
Andy,
on.
I'm sorry. I was
Yes.
wondering, does Andy have anything to add to what we were just saying?
No, I mean, I think the thing that really jumps out to me when I look at the USA chart is the opposition of Mercury and Pluto, and I just think that and with Pluto there in the second, I think anything that triggers those 2 points, so anything at 24 or 27, and 27 is also going to play into the moon. I think it's going to shake things up. And I mean, of course, we could look at how Trump's, 27 Aquarius moon. I mean, that's, opposing his Mars, 21 Gemini Mars. That's right on his sun. I mean, Trump's future and the United States' future is linked, but the transition that the United States is likely to go through is also likely to be transitory for Trump and not necessarily in a positive way. So the growing pains of the United States could, in fact, be growing pains for Donald Trump as well. I still think that there's a lot of chaos, not necessarily bad chaos, but chaos to the extent that it's not in the normal baseline that we have come to expect. And this chart, there's so many significant things happening here, in my opinion. But what jumps out to me, though, Kathy, consistently is this opposition, because those are the only two retrograde planets as well. So it's the thing, man. It's not going to be just like it's always been. This period, and this goes back to everything that we have been talking about from the very first show the three of us did together. I still think that there is a lot that's going to push back the timeline. I do not believe that the inauguration is likely to happen on January the 20th. I think that some of these things are going to be triggering agents that is going to cause us to look at things, kind of add it all together. That takes some time, and I think it pushes it back. And as we get into March and April, then I think that those transits are not favorable for Trump. So if these things are pushed back, I think that puts more and more pressure against Trump as opposed to assisting him. So that's what I think.
I'm sorry I interrupted you, Louise. I wanted to give Andy that.
No, absolutely.
All right. So
yeah, Donald Trump, as Andy was saying, this full moon Donald Trump was born on an eclipse, a full moon eclipse, lunar eclipse. This full moon is sitting right on it, with Jupiter retrograde on his Uranus at the top of his chart yet again. Various, well, we can go through all the aspects, but having a full moon right on his full moon is kind of activating his natal promise in a way, but it's also going to shift it because it's square to Neptune. Okay, so reveal things. There's so much to say. My throat hurts, so I'm going to let Kathy kind of.
Well, I would just point people up to the top of the chart. Uranus has moved back across, retrograde Uranus has now gone across his midheaven twice. The midheaven, that line that goes down the center of the chart, is basically, it's your place in the world and in your home. So where your roots are, family, ancestral stuff, early childhood, and then your public reputation, your career. So the planet that this wrecking ball, lightning lobbing influence has now gone back. It's gone across it. Now it's just basically gone over it. It's basically sitting there, essentially on his midheaven. And in March, it will cross it for the third time, when a bunch of other stuff will be happening from the Mars retrograde story. So this is not a formula for we're just going to go move back into this job we had before. And Louise has just drawn a line between the moon and his Saturn and Venus in Cancer in the 11th house of group associations. That could be Trump org. It's anything that he does with other people, collective. It's also long-term wishes. And the moon is in a really uncomfortable relationship. It is in that I've got a pebble in my shoe and I keep moving my foot and it's still there and it's still there and it's still there. There is an element here of an irritant that you cannot get rid of coming to him from this full moon. And it has to do with a lot of information, a lot of illumination, and things coming to light about cloaked alliances. Neptune is in his 7th house of partners and one-on-one and open enemies. So things that have been shrouded in mist are not quite shown for what they were. And that Neptune is in an unbroken flow with that Venus and Saturn, his signature for family money or getting money from governments or, however you want to look at it. So this is tied into the New York case is part of this. The question of whether that lawsuit should be thrown out simply because he is the president-elect when he's already been convicted. So this lineup suggests it's not a slam dunk that the sentencing is going to go away.
And also, I mentioned before that on the same day as the full moon, just hours afterwards, Mercury stations direct and starts retracing its steps. And Mercury did go retrograde right on Donald Trump's moon. So the information that we're not seeing at the moment that's being uncovered is going to start coming to light.
Yeah, and that's been a consistent theme, I think, that we've talked about throughout. Not only the thing that's interesting, I think, with Trump is that his full moon is timed directly into his nodes. And the conjunction that Kathy's talking about there with Venus and Saturn goes back to what I was talking about a second ago with Mercury and Pluto in the US chart. So his conjunction there with Venus and Saturn is hitting the US Mercury, but it's in opposition to the US Pluto there in the second. And so his financial dealings may come back to haunt him. And so those past financial transgressions, what's the root of the case in New York and most everything else against Trump, there are a lot of international players that may come into play here. I still think get the popcorn ready because, baby, it's on. There's still stuff that's going to happen. There's so much under the surface. The only real question is, has it been contained? Does Trump have the players in place to keep that information suppressed or not? To me, that is the fundamental question upon which most of this swings. And I still believe that no matter how much they try to push that down, it's going to sprout up like a little, twig.
Oh, Andy just froze.
Oh.
And
Oh, you froze there, but we get the idea. It's all gonna start coming out, I think.
I can give two recent news reports that play into what Andy is saying. One of them is that a red state governor, might be Missouri, not sure, has complained openly that there's been a pay to play pressure. Like if you want a role, if you want this, you must pay, which is not how our government's supposed to work. So that would be a member of the GOP coming out and saying these people are pressuring for money to get nominated for something. That's pretty big. The second thing is there is a very, very wealthy Asian man. I think he's Chinese. He just bought a banana, a duct taped banana in an art auction for a huge amount of money and ate it. He has he's got SEC charges against him. I think he may actually even be convicted. At any rate, pretty severe, and he has given an unthinkable amount of money to Trump. This has just now come out in the news. So these are examples of the sorts of little weeds that are going to be sprouting more and more and more.
And this is so blatant. I mean, it is consistent. It is right out in the open. The idea that Trump doesn't even take a salary, this dude is on the take in every direction. This is like Tammany Hall. I mean, this is crazy. So when you start having foreign players.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. And Kathy talked about an adjustment aspect and inconjunct. I call them quincunxes, but same thing. And Saturn can actually bring clarity too. It can bring but also for him, it will feel like, uh-oh, I'm hitting a wall here, kind of thing. Anyway, should we move on to
Do you want to put
Cam
Kamala's chart up with the full moon?
Yeah, I'm going to move on to Kamala. Kamala. So here she is. So this is her ascendant and her north node at 24 degrees Gemini. The full moon is right on her nodes, which is her path in life or lessons to learn, or there's all kinds of interpretations. But also her ascendant is, her what she is becoming more of over time and her face to the world. Uranus is almost exactly back on her Jupiter in the 12th house, revealing sudden changes and expansion. I'm sure Kathy's got other words for it. Neptune is in that itchy kind of aspect to her natal full moon. She was born on a full moon too. So she's also very in alignment with full moon energy. I don't know if anybody has heard of Kira Sutherland, she's actually a medical astrologer and naturopath, but she said when it's our lunar phase, and I've found this to be true, it's kind of, we're more attuned to it. So both Donald Trump and she are very attuned to full moons. So this full moon is hitting both of them very powerfully in different places. I happen to feel like it's better for her, but Jupiter's square her Pluto, by the way, and her Chiron at that point. Anyway, go on, Kathy.
Well, mentioning the Chiron, notice it's Saturn
Yeah.
in Pisces is sitting up there in her 10th house on her Chiron. When Saturn moves through your 10th house, you are basically challenged to hit the pinnacle of your career prospects. And if you misuse your power, the karmic 2x4 comes down between your eyes. Saturn was in Nixon's 10th house when he resigned. Oh, such simpler times in Watergate. So Saturn is sitting on her Chiron, her wound, and opposing her Uranus. On Christmas Eve, Jupiter will have retrograded back to 13 degrees Gemini, and it will be an exact T-square. And the reason this has been jumping out at me is, first off, there will be, it's like something possibly healing or containing her wound, shooting her out of the darkness. On August 19th, at the time of the Democratic National Convention, Saturn and Jupiter and Saturn were in a similar challenging aspect, but they were at 17 degrees, which is the degree of her Venus, part of this cluster, this change agent cluster she's got. She has the two cosmic change agents, Uranus, radical change, and Pluto, evolutionary level change, conjunct Venus, her value system, in the sign having to do with making things better, fixing them, doing things more efficiently. So in August, and also Venus in the sky at the Democratic National Convention was on her Venus. So this set a story in motion on Christmas Eve. There is this unlocking sudden whoosh. And I'll just say on January 20th, Venus will have moved across the chart to be conjunct Saturn in her 10th house. When I first saw that, I went, well, that sure looks like a woman president. So she's going to be doing something really, really big and important and public
Oh,
growing
and
out of this.
just to add to what Kathy has said, Saturn was retrograde on on election day and is now direct, moving forward, kind of going back over something that was blocked, I guess, on election day. Anyway, Andy, any thoughts on that? So
I still think that Kamala is like a big deal and will have a major impact. And I don't think that whatever's happened is really going to slow her down too much. So I'm excited for whatever comes for her. I still think that her chart compared to Donald's, she is the stronger of the two as well. Excuse me.
The full moon is also in aspect to her Mars in Leo, which she and Donald Trump both have Mars in Leo, but hers is in the third house, which is the voice, information, community. But also, you know, I think she's gonna kind of, things are gonna turn around. Keep saying it, but
Jupiter in the 12th house. She's got Jupiter natally and Jupiter by transit in the 12th house, which is hidden stuff. It's things going on in the subconscious. It's things, backroom stuff you can't see. Jupiter is kind of like Santa Claus. And I see Jupiter in the 12th house as a cosmic nightlight. And that Uranus sitting on her Jupiter, I believe in miracles. I mean, it sounds insane, but I keep seeing Natalie Wood as Susan Walker at the end of Miracle on 34th Street, sitting in the car that her mother's boyfriend is driving and just looking out the window going, I believe, it's silly, but I believe. And then seeing the house that she asked Kris Kringle for, and it's there, even when it wasn't under the tree where she was expecting it. So we're not crazy for thinking there's still another potential ending to this saga.
yeah. Now, I'd love to quickly look at Joe Biden's and then Jack Smith's, because people are waiting for this report that Jack Smith is supposedly going to be releasing. And so we'll look at that. But when we last looked at Joe Biden, we talked about don't underestimate, you know, a 12th house Scorpio, you know, and that things were happening behind the scenes. So I'm leaving just the full moon chart up here with him as well. So Mars, though, is, as we record this, stationing retrograde very close to his 8th house Pluto. And that speaks to me of Dark Brandon coming, and he's just pardoned his son. And a lot of people are thinking, oh, this is happening. It's on. He's going to do stuff. More thoughts on?
I'll point out that Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius in his second house of values and talents, and Pluto rules all that Scorpio, is in an exact square or an activating aspect with his moon in the 5th house. He saved his son's survival.
Yes.
And it happened after Kash Patel was floated as FBI director. So this is I sent a message to both Linda and Andy when that news broke saying, why now? Why not as on his way out of the White House? Well, maybe we find out, maybe we don't, but we've been talking about an uncomfortable aspect that the sun in the full moon at 23 Sagittarius is in that kind of uncomfortable aspect with his Scorpio cluster, with his Mercury saying, I gotta speak out. I have to say things. And the moon in the 7th house of allies and open enemies is in an adjustment aspect to that Scorpio cluster. I would say much more to come from him at the full moon.
Definitely, or leading up to it as well.
Right,
And just
right,
to,
right.
you know, Kathy mentioned the Pluto square to the moon, and then we'll do Andy. But Biden also has his Neptune in Libra at 1 degree, 1 degree Libra in the 10th, public visibility, career reputation, and the nodes are going back to his Neptune. I've long felt that Biden has this feeling that this is his kind of time to leave his real legacy, and it's about his purpose and all kinds of things like that. Add to that, it's Pluto's in an adjustment with his own nodes. So there's this real deep sense for me of Biden going, not on my watch.
And
yeah, it's also on the USA. It's also on the USA Midhaven.
Yeah. It is.
right at the very tippity top of the chart. So
Yeah.
that shaking and baking is going to have a very public facing element to it, I would think. So his
Mhm.
desire to have an impact is going to have an impact in the ways in which the United States is perceived.
Mhm.
I think they're tied together.
Yep.
I wouldn't say this is entirely out of ego, though. That
I don't think that at all.
Oh,
no,
I don't.
that Neptune in Libra up there in the 10th house, he has a very idealistic vision for this country. He always, his ascendant is the same as the US ascendant, Sagittarius, and he always says his definition of America is possibility. And that Neptune in Libra up there in his career house leads to people hanging stuff on him, that his being misjudged, people not seeing him correctly or accurately. But by the same token, that's like his conduit for where information, where I believe the man really does go to church every day. I think that's a fact. And I would imagine that he prays a lot and that he gets divine guidance on what to do and that he acts on it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's from ego at all either. It's just that sense of purpose. Like this is kind of what it's all been leading to, for me. And I'm not going to let this destroy the country I've served for all my life, because he's Virgo on the midheaven, which is very much about service. He may not agree with everything he's done in his lifetime. These people are all human, But I think he just really has this sense of purpose right now, to be honest. And really, the full moon is pretty much square is midheaven, and his IC in Pisces and Virgo, kind of like almost spiritual service. I always think of that line. So,
How do we want to be perceived on the world stage? Do we want to be perceived as someone who sells off political appointments to the highest bidder, regardless of competency? Do we want to be a rude, sexist, adjudicated rapist, barreling through? Or do we want to have a different way to present ourselves on the world stage? All these things are major factors in what's going to happen with Trump. All these things are big deals. And the fact that his Neptune there is right at the tippity top of the USA chart, I think is important. How we present ourselves as a collective, all these things are coming into play. It's not just the world and us. We have to interact here. And that's why I still maintain that there are additional players, alliances on the outside that will impact the way that this election ultimately is decided. It will impact to the degree to which Trump can really go do his thing on his terms and his Project 2025 and all that. I just don't think that the collective will allow that to happen. Maybe I'm just in my own Pollyanist, unicorn world. I don't know. But I persist in this. And I think that there is still too much energy in opposition to what he is trying to push forward. And I think that the next couple of months is going to be an opportunity for those forces to step up. And that's what I expect. And I'm still expecting it and still saying it out loud. So that's how I feel. And that's what I expect.
So that Neptune in Libra, and some words that come to mind for me as it applies to Biden is, I keep hearing about this idea of America, this American dream, and all that kind of thing, which, as we know, has faltered. But he is tied in to he believes in what America could be, the possibility of potential of it. And what I just highlighted here is another finger of fate god. He is like, I'm here to bring in the true dream of what America promised.
And that was the whole thrust of Kamala's campaign, if you really want to look at it. She talked about possibility and economics of inclusion and economics of opportunity for people, no matter where they come from. And I think that it is a battle for the collective soul. And
I really
I
do.
think Biden is less of a player and will have less of an impact, even though he's the sitting president. I think there are other factors that will be more important in how this plays out than President Biden. But obviously, he's a big deal in that he is the sitting president. But I think people in the diplomatic community may have an even greater impact. I still think that there are a lot of other mitigating factors outside of just who's president that come into play, including the United States military. And so I just keep saying it. I don't think it's done. I think there's too much at risk here. There's too many people connected into all this. And I don't want people to just go, well, it's over. There's nothing we can do. There's a lot that can still be done. And I think a lot that will still be done as well. It's going to get entertaining, especially after after Mars goes retrograde on the 6th. I do believe that.
So are we ready for Jack Smith? I mean, we could keep going for ages with these.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Jack Smith, a lot of people really disappointed that he kind of has asked for charges to be dropped, but he did it without prejudice. So all these cases can be brought again. And anyway, there's so much happening with him, but the full moon itself is pretty much square to his natal nodes and his Pluto and his Jupiter in the 4th house. He's like, I'm not finished, kind of thing. The prosecution is still on at some point. It's also aspecting his moon in court. Saturn's coming up to his midheaven, which is saying, I'm going to kind of bring the rules down, if you like. Neptune's so much here. I do want to mention, though, that one of the dates we've been talking about is the middle of the Mercury retrograde, called the Cazimi, when the Sun and Mercury meet in the middle of the retrograde. That's at 14 degrees, 27 minutes, Gemini, just 20 solar arc minutes from his natal sun. We don't have a time, so ignore the ascendant. And at that time, it's opposing it, and Jupiter is on his sun then. I wouldn't be surprised if he does release the report. What do you think, Kathy?
Well, he'll hand it over to Merrick Garland. It's just a question of how much of it Garland reveals. That seems to indicate something coming forward. It definitely does. And I will point out, I've mentioned before the December 24th, the square between Jupiter and Saturn will happen with Jupiter close enough. It'll be within a degree of his sun, and Saturn squaring that from the house of legalities. It's a natural pausing point, wrapping up point, but it isn't necessarily the end of the story at all, because those two guys are going to square again next year, which I know is just know that there's other action going on, and there is a huge activation again of Jack Smith's chart in March, which we've mentioned. I said the Mars retrograde business will come up again in January. It will come up again in March. There are other things happening in March. So don't think this is the end of what Jack Smith has put together with his cases at all. Also notice that Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius in his 8th house, which is deep research, it's also criminality, other people's resources, that sort of thing, is moving into, it'll be closer to it next year, hint, hint, an unbroken flow to his Mercury, which is in Gemini, and it will be in an action demanding aspect with his Saturn.
Mm.
So,
but regarding where we're at right now, Mercury again is stationing direct on the same day as the full moon on his Mars, pretty much, and we'll be heading back towards the top of his chart and re-enter the seventh house of politics and open enemies and things. But he's the prosecutor, right? He's one of the prosecutors involved in all of this. So whether we'll see his report yet or not, I don't know, but he is also not done.
his Mars is on the United States North Node, which is our potential, our direction. So his fighter mode is to, pursue and protect what our country is about.
People, well, I've called him a Rottweiler, so it's that kind of like fighter for justice. I'm not gonna let go kind of thing. Yeah, so and we're not going to go so far ahead yet, but as Kathy said, some of the aspects like coming into March next year and so on his chart are just kind of quite astounding. So yeah, that's all you need to know at this point. So my summation from this, and we can look at other charts, is that these people are major players in this election. Yes, I do think there is lots going on with NATO and stuff as well, but all these charts are majorly highlighted. Maybe we need to get merit garlands at some point, but anyway. Anybody want to look at any other charts, or Andy, do you have anything to say about Jack?
I love him. I think that he will be quiet short term, but loud later. That's what I think. That I think that in the short term, he may not be as much of a factor, but he has already created a lot. He knows a lot. I think his day to present that will happen. And I still think that will have an incredibly negative impact on Trump and a lot of people tied into him. So regardless of what happens with him over the next 30 days or so, I think that his work has not just gone off into some, vacuum someplace. I think it matters, and I think it will come into play in a significant way ultimately. And I think he is a badass, and I love him.
Can I just say my apologies to anybody listening? I was talking about houses, and I'm full of cold or something, and of course we don't know his time of birth, so I'm like, oh, so
well,
about houses.
Solar houses give information, so
yeah,
they do. So
they do.
there's an element here. We've been close to an hour. Do we want to look at NATO real quickly and then come back to it on Friday with all those other people?
Because we have a time now for NATO, thanks to somebody who commented on my YouTube. So we do read your comments and pay attention. So thank you to that person. Kathy, go for it with this.
Looky there, the moon is on the moon. So NATO is about alliances and agreements. The moon, it's what it, and a lot of behind the scenes stuff, a lot of negotiations, a lot of things that aren't out in public. NATO also has a massive military and fighting component. Look at that packed 10th house public status. It's the sun, which is what it is, its values and peoples, Venus, how it's drive, Mars. So the ruler of the god of war, the ruler of Venus, of Aries is there, and so is communication. So it doesn't back off, and it fights to protect, and all of that. And there we go. So the Mars retrograde is, oh, there we go. The beautiful, beautiful grand trine, an unbroken flow of energy from retrograde Mars to, which is like, what is NATO? What are we doing in the first house? Who are we going over territory? Unbroken flow to information that has been dug up with the Mercury retrograde ending and sending stuff out into the world and international components to it. on
On
top of Chiron.
yeah, no,
And in an unbroken flow too, we're going to take action. I mean, I would expect some fairly bellicose statements to come out of NATO around this moon, if not actual things flying through the air, because Mercury does represent those. So there could be a don't scream, people. There could be a bombing mission that comes out of this.
it could be, yeah.
There could be.
Or yeah, it could be, or it could be something words wise. But just to, we're not again going to move the chart this far forward yet. But when Mars stations direct, it will station direct exactly on the ascendant of NATO. And so, this is Cancer is very much about safety, security, protection. And NATO is, I think we've looked at Rutte's chart already, the Director General of NATO. We've seen NATO leaders going to visit Trump already. I think they're saying, no. We are not going to let NATO be broken. Yeah.
And Mars sits at 17 Cancer for almost a month. It gets there pretty early in February, from the 12th to March 9th. So even though it stations direct on February 23rd, it's just going to sit there bearing down and bearing down and bearing down.
I think NATO's had it with Putin. So we'll probably look at all that on Friday. So any last thoughts from you, Andy, on NATO?
I think that NATO is an important element to this. Again, we have alliances. I realize that Trump thinks that they don't matter. I believe that they do, and I think that whatever happens with NATO will have a significant impact on what happens within the United States in the next 60 days. I would expect that tensions between Russia and Eastern Europe, maybe Sweden, Finland, get kind of complicated over the next few weeks as well. And I don't think that that's going to be a quiet area. There are a lot of potential areas of conflict that could happen that could change things in a heartbeat. And I still think that the next 20, 30 days, it heats up dramatically in ways that are probably going to be somewhat unexpected. So I'm interested next week in really getting into, on Friday, really get into NATO's chart and Putin's chart and who plays with who, because I think that will be important. The interrelationships, NATO is bigger than Putin. NATO is bigger than Trump. And it will be interesting to see the inner aspects between all the major players and the collective body of NATO. Because NATO has its own personality, has its own chart, just the United States does. And I think that chart is going to be really significant when we dive into it on Friday.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I don't have any last words. You, Cassie?
I go back to what I always say, and that is spend time in the world you want to be in. Go do fun things. I'm going to a Grinch grotto, okay? I mean, watch Christmas movies, watch Hallmark Channel, hang out with younger people that make you laugh, do goofy things. Please build some day-by-day moments of joy and sparks of hope and happiness in your life, and they will start to catch fire with other people. And this isn't just la-la thinking. This is what
And
we're
all three of us do that, by the way. We do our self-care, we go out, we have fun, we connect with our friends. You have to stay kind of in your, and again, it's not sticking your head in the sand or things. There's no, what is the point of sitting there being all like, oh, we're doomed? We're not doomed. I'm telling you.
No.
We are definitely not doomed. Unicornia, baby. There are a lot of good things to look forward to. And I do not want.
Go on. I'm sorry.
I don't want people to give up and go, oh my gosh, it's Trump. We have no power. We do. Be in a happy space, but also don't roll over and play dead either. be in a happy space, but be ready to do something too. So yeah, it'll be good.
Buy yourself cuddlies if you like them. This one sits on my desk, so I've got all kinds of fun things around.
I have a comfort dragon. There we
Witchy
go.
poo.
I keep hearing a song from Hamilton when the Schuyler sisters first come to New York, and they sing, "What a wonderful time to be alive."
Yes.
Go
I
to
think
that energy.
it's exciting. Yep.
We
All
live in
right.
interesting times.
We do. Peace out till Friday.
See you on Friday. Happy